Scott Rasmussen, he's a pollster, founder of Rasmussen. I'm sorry, I did it again. Rasmussen Reports. I'm sorry, Scott. One of these days I'll get it right.
Hey, listen, I've been called lots worse.
Well, so have I, as a matter of fact, and recently, in fact. But let's go right to the main point. Scott Rasmussen, Rasmussen Reports. You probably are the guy that congressmen don't really want to see coming around the corner. Now, you've had a couple of polls up lately. The first one that caught my eye was Sunday. You said that 57% of the Americans you polled would vote everybody in Congress the heck out. How strong and how deep is that feeling?
Well, it's a deep feeling. It's been around for a long time. Americans don't like Congress. They don't think the system works very well. And they get frustrated because the rules of the game are written so that incumbents almost always win re-election. You know, even back in 1994, the year that we remember as the big upheaval in Congress, 90% of the incumbents who ran for re-election got re-elected. So it's very tough to do, and that's what leads to so much frustration along the way. By the way, half of all voters believe the reason these guys get re-elected is because the system is rigged by the people who write the rules.
Wow. So they're writing their own rules and getting reelected in a rigged election because they wrote the rules. I mean, have people given up on changing Congress?
Given up is too strong a word, but there's a great deal of frustration. Back in '94, there was a sense, Republicans couldn't possibly do any worse because they hadn't done anything in 40 years, hadn't been in charge in 40 years. By 2006, people weren't happy with the way things were happening under the Republican leadership for a variety of reasons and switched back. And there's just frustration with both options. One stat that people don't like to talk about too much, consistently when we ask people about the importance of a variety of issues, government corruption and ethics comes up number 2, second only to the economy. And most independent voters don't trust either party to deal with it.
Well, that's interesting. We're talking to Scott Rasmussen, the pollster and founder of Rasmussen Reports. Scott, you also have another poll out saying 51% say Congress is too liberal and 22% say it's too conservative. Tie that back for me, please. When you're talking about the fact that there's distrust out there, it seems like the people don't really trust either party at this point, so people are just kind of frustrated and throwing up their hands. Is that a misread?
Not at all. In fact, this is not a slam on Democrats in Congress. Most Republican voters, they overwhelmingly say the Republican representatives are out of touch. Half of Republican voters say that Republican congressmen are too liberal as well. So this is something that we've seen, and really it's capturing a frustration that began last fall. The economy began to sputter. Voters vehemently opposed a $700 billion bailout that was proposed in the Bush administration.
Yeah.
Guess what? The bailout happened. They vehemently opposed the takeover of General Motors and Chrysler. That happened too. And there is a sense of frustration that somebody should be listening to us. We see that playing out in the town hall meetings. We see it in the numbers in the health care debate.
Now, we're seeing the town hall meetings culminating in a Congress coming back to Washington next week. They've been pretty much beat up for a month. But the president is now, I guess, pulling out all the stops, and he's coming to a joint session of Congress next Wednesday night to sell health care. How critical is this for him? I mean, is he going to just be able to give another vague, rah-rah kind of speech and wow the crowd? It doesn't seem like it.
No, not at all. This is a very important speech. It's probably the most important moment of his presidency, certainly to date, and it could be the most important moment of his entire first term. What the president needs to do is say something different. Voters are rejecting the arguments they've heard. They do not believe that this plan will lead to lower spending or lower deficits. In fact, 2 out of 3 say it will lead to higher deficits, and a majority think that the government's involvement will lead to higher costs overall and lower quality of care. So the president needs to say something different, perhaps guidance for Congress, perhaps the strategic decision he could make is to move back to the middle, say, well, let's pass a scaled-down program that we can build strong support for across bipartisan lines. That would be well received in the center, but it would devastate his partisan base. On the other hand, he could try to please his partisan base and get them riled up and in support of the plan. That's likely to antagonize those in the political center.
We're talking to Scott Rasmussen, the president of Rasmussen Reports, which is the poll that I read every day. Seems to me he's got some heat coming at him from the left, Scott. How bad is that? I mean, it seems to me these guys, they'll rant and rave. I mean, I thought the most hilarious headline that I've seen so far this year was The Hill, and they had a headline about 2 weeks ago that said, Reid is under pressure to rein in the moderates. Yeah. How much are the hard lefties really upset? And have you measured? Is that a real problem for Obama yet?
Well, they are very upset, and they're really having a hard time adjusting to the fact that most Americans are not enthusiastic about this health care plan. This is something that people on the political left have been pushing for a very long time. They thought this was their moment, and they thought the American people were ready to be very supportive. For most Americans, health care reform meant reducing costs, not some of the other aspects of the program. Right now, though, in the president's approval ratings, we see Democrats very strongly supportive still, liberal Democrats still very strongly supportive. When we look at the health care reform program, Democrats are becoming even stronger in their support of the plan moving its way through Congress. So it's wrong to suggest that people on the left right now are unhappy with President Obama. They may be concerned, they may be worried about some signals as to where he's going, but to this point, very strong support.
Well, one of the things that really is interesting to me, and you see it in a lot of the public pronouncements of the Democrats, of their activist associated groups, this Healthcare Now and all the rest of these guys, they're really targeting the House Blue Dogs. Now, there's 52 of them, I think. How is this going to read out for these guys? I mean, are the House Blue Dogs, these guys are supposedly fiscal moderates, strong on national security. They haven't really voted that way most of the time. But are these guys really in danger of losing next year if they go along with Pelosi on health care?
Some of them most certainly are going to lose if they head in that direction. The thing that we see in congressional elections is people who have been elected for just one term and are seeking their first reelection, or perhaps even 2 terms and going for a second reelection, are the most vulnerable congressmen. I mean, they are the ones that really have a risk of losing your seat. Once you get past 2 terms, it's about as safe a job as being a tenured college professor. But these people that the Democrats won a lot of seats in the last 2 elections tended to be from more conservative and centrist districts, a lot of them carried by John McCain. And those districts are not responding well to the president. They're not responding well to these proposals. And these Blue Dogs, are going to be in a very difficult position. Nancy Pelosi is going to be asked to find a way to let them vote their district rather than their party, and that's going to make the vote counting very difficult for the Speaker.
Last question before I let you go. Scott Rasmussen of Rasmussen Reports. How do you think the president's going to play it Wednesday night? Is he going to go hard? Is he going to go soft? Is he going to be a salesman? Or is he going to get specific, which he really hasn't done so far?
I have absolutely no idea what the president will do. What I read is that people in the White House are still fighting about what strategy to undertake. So I don't know where he's going. I do think if he comes to this event and doesn't say something new, it will be a major problem for him. What he says, I have no idea.
Well, as my sainted grandma used to say, from your lips to God's ears, may it be a big problem for him. Scott Rasmussen, Rasmussen Reports, thanks for joining us. Jed Babin for Fred.